Always trust.
We ask the question, what is needed in the world?
Kako spojiti migracije, održivost i globalno upravljanje u lokalna rješenja. Za Al Jazeeru objašnjava Marta Foresti, bivša savjetnica ministarskog tima u Italijanskom Ministarstvu finansija i osnivačica kreativnog kolektiva Lago. Foresti je u organizaciji za globalna pitanja ODI viša saradnica i upravo u migrantima vidi kreativni i ekonomski potencijal. Smatra da je to pokazatelj mnogih vrijednosti koju migracije donose sa sobom. Jedan od uspješnih modela je i u Bosni i Hercegovini. O kreiranju migrantskih politika koje direktno doprinose ekonomiji zemalja domaćina te inkluzivnoj modnoj industriji razgovaramo u prostorijama Bazardžana sa Martom Foresti.
Mrs. Foresti, welcome to Al Jazeera Balkans program.
Thank you.
So you are here in Sarajevo for the opening of the exhibition Wearing It Together, a journey of inclusion through fashion. Can you tell us more about the exhibition, but about the campaign in general?
Sure, and thank you very much for having me. So this exhibition is a photographic exhibition that will put together images of models and beautiful outfits shot in the city of Sarajevo and in the city of Belgrade by an Italian photographer, who's also a news photographer and a sort of a high fashion photographer working with brands like Dolce & Gabbana and others. But the whole idea of this exhibition, and indeed the work that the International Organization for Migration does here in Bosnia and Herzegovina on fashion, is to showcase how talent and design in fashion can also lead to pathways to inclusion for those who come through different routes to the Western Balkans, either in transit or as a destination. So it's deliberately bringing together the world of fashion, the world of migration in the beautiful cities of Sarajevo and Belgrade.
We will come back to the Balkans because we need to emphasize that you worked a lot with African diaspora, connecting African and European cities. So how does that look like?
So it was a real pleasure to discover colleagues here working on fashion and migration because, as you say, my experience has been very much in the African-Europe space. This is work that I've been doing for a few years with cities in Africa and Europe, and particularly the city of Milan, which happens to be my city of origin, where I'm originally from, the mayor of Milan, and the mayor of Freetown in Sierra Leone. They were determined to find ways to create opportunities for European and African cities to work together to show that the movement of people within and between cities on the two continents was a reality that many city mayors experience. And they were looking for very concrete ways to show in practice the kind of things that happen when people move to cities. And it was actually the mayor of Freetown that came up with the idea of fashion, to say there is an emerging sector in my city of creatives who will really benefit from opportunities to connect with fellow designers in Europe, in Milan, where of course there is a very well established fashion industry. And so that was a journey that we started with this friendship between these two mayors and these two cities, and then led us to engage and work with the African diaspora in London, where there is a very vibrant scene of emerging fashion labels, and create actually very concrete opportunities for designers across the continents to work together, learn from each other, showcase their work, and as of late, within the African continent, some of the designers from the city of Freetown had the opportunity to showcase their creations at the Durban Fashion Week in South Africa as a result of the collaborations of the city of Durban and Freetown. So a real sort of journey of discovery of the potential of the creatives across borders in cities and across continents.
And is this work frame applicable in any area of the world, including the Balkans?
Well, there are a few things to be said, on this. Obviously, different parts of the world have their experiences and their characteristics, including on the movement of people and how people arrive or leave from particular places. But there are a couple of things that I think are definitely common to some of these experiences. The first is actually on fashion itself, fashion and clothes and textiles. Is something, the sort of traditions of of clothes expressing who we are is something to be found in different parts of the world, in different cultures. And so it's something that, you know, is definitely common of experiences of populations all over. And the other aspect, which is very transferable, if you wish, is this experience of cities. Cities is where people move to, notwithstanding a little bit, you know, their places of origins. People come to cities in search for opportunities, for jobs. And so these experiences of cities, you know, sharing the lessons of not just hosting, but also creating opportunities for creatives is something that we are finding in different parts of the world. And in a way, my presence here is the proof that there is potential to build on the experiences of Africa, Europe, and now the Balkans in this creative space.
Since you worked a lot with migrants, can you describe us some more this migrants' journey of inclusion through this fashion, their challenges, for instance?
Sure. I mean, there are, you know, as we all know, there are many challenges for people who want to move these days. Particularly, there are parts of the world where movement is not a choice, and I think in this region you have experienced a lot the movement of people coming from conflict-affected regions, including Syria and others over the years, and where the Balkans have become a really important route of transit for some of those. People who move from Africa, within Africa, often staying in Africa, looking for opportunities, particularly if places where people are from, opportunities are limited. So there are definitely challenges related to migration journeys, and we see particularly in Europe, in the political discourse in Europe, that is certainly not getting any easier to facilitate the regular migration of people. But this is where fashion comes in, and fashion and design and the creative sectors, because I think we all understand that if you have, you know, the capacity, the skills, and the appetite, the ambition, the dream to create something new and beautiful that you want to share with others, being able to visit, to go somewhere, to see you know, new places, new cities, to see the mountains, the sea, to exchange ideas is part of what makes creativity happen. And so the idea that in sectors like fashion and design, food for that matter, or the arts, there is real potential by facilitating the movement of people is something that I think we can all understand. And it really helps to break down this very difficult barrier when it comes to migration, that apart from the actual physical borders between countries, in the way we talk about people who move, there is this very strong sense that who I am is different from who you are, because we are from different places. Understanding each other by virtue of what we wear or what we like, and the beauty that we see in what's around us, is something where there is a lot of potential to create common grounds between people who move and people who stay.
You mentioned governments, and your main expertise actually and background is in policy making. So it doesn't end with the exhibition, it goes further than that.
Oh, it goes a lot further. Yes, I mean, I've spent years and years working with governments and advising particularly governments, both at the national level, at the city level, trying to find ways to create policy space to facilitate or to facilitate and to support the movement of people.
How hard was this?
It was incredibly hard because of the narratives and the stories and the political discourse around migration. In fact, is not getting any easier. I mean, I'm originally from Milan, I live in London. I think anyone who's following the news in the UK knows that as I speak, the way in which we are talking about people arriving to the country is becoming harsher and harsher, and the actual concrete opportunities for people to have a choice to move is restricting. So I was getting worried about the fact that with such entrenched political discourse on migration, the idea of enabling policy it is actually getting harder and harder. And so this is where beginning to engage with and discover the potential of the creative industries are spaces where people are experiencing each other's talents and crafts in very concrete ways, and where there is a long tradition of people visiting other parts of the world. Think of the music industry. Think of when, say, the popularity, for example, of Afrobeats right now in Europe. Well, if African artists and musicians are not able to move and to visit to be able to share their crafts and their arts, we will all lose out. And so this is where I began to really be inspired by the potential of creativity, the arts, fashion and design as areas where, you know, there is perhaps a little bit of space where we can create this common ground, which in turn hopefully will create, you know, a story and a narrative around migration that will influence the way ultimately migration policies are devised.
But you're pushing like a counter narrative. How hard is this in lands and countries that are not quite migrant friendly?
So
how do you do it?
You do it with practice. You do it with exhibitions. You do it with fashion shows. You do it with music concerts. So, you know, the idea is that you do not, you know, create a counter narrative on migration per se. You actually create concrete opportunities to meet and create something together. I was only, you know, an hour ago visiting the reception center not far from here in Sarajevo, where so many people in transit spend some time, and how the work of No Nation Fashion, which is of course the label that is now creating these opportunities for migrants.
So in very tangible ways.
In very tangible ways, in which sort of tailors and designers from Bosnia are now working alongside, you know, designers and tailors from Afghanistan and Iran, and creating a collection together. So you do it not by talking about it, but by showing, by seeing what the talent and the craftsmanship and the skills can actually produce.
You have also, a year ago, you established Lago community, local actions on global opportunities. Could you please briefly then introduce this concept and mission of Lago Collective, especially with regards to migration?
Of course. So as I said, I worked for many years in policy advisory, in policy research. And when I started to work with colleagues here and in Africa and in European cities on fashion and the creative economy and design, I really felt that the policy world, and what I mean by policy, I mean, for example, the international community, the UN system, the World Bank, or governments that, you know, are, of course, tasked to come up with practical solutions to manage the reality of the movement of people, that there was no connection between this, you know, this emerging experiences coming from the creative sectors, these emerging markets in different parts of the world, and the policy community and the policy space. So, for example, you could walk into, by the way, absolutely beautiful UN building in New York, really an architectural masterpiece, and see pieces of art. In fact, at the entrance there is a big sculpture of a very famous Italian, Gio Pomodoro, very famous Italian sculpturist, and then there is pieces of art and design throughout the building. But the connection between those products, those they're manufactured by people from the different parts of the world, and the policy that are being discussed in the buildings is often not made. And so I thought, you know, I know this policy world a little bit, and I know how it works, and I know how also restricted the space for migration policy discussions have become. And so what if we create more of a conversation and a connection between the creatives and the innovators and the reformers, so that perhaps together we can, you know, find that common ground that I said is so rare in the migration space. And so together with colleagues that work in policy advisory and ODI, which is the think tank where for many years I worked, we decided to try something, try something different. So to actually create a platform where some of these conversations can be.
Is it inclusive and profitable?
Is non-profit and is inclusive, and then is designed very much to, to connect people from different, inclusive in the way of creating connections between the creative industries and the policy space that so rarely connect and have the opportunity to work together.
You do have a rich career in field of migration, global governance and sustainability. So how can you explain us, how do you connect reformers, designers, all this creative sector with policy and decision makers? Can you give us a few examples?
Yes. So let me give you two or three examples. In the case that I mentioned earlier, the work that we've done, that I helped and we've done on fashion in African and European cities has been a matter of sort of leveraging the connection, actually the political connection between mayors in different cities and use that as a platform to then create very concrete opportunities for the creatives to get engaged in, for example, city exchanges. So a year ago, exactly almost a year ago, I was in Freetown in Sierra Leone with the mayor, where, created sort of promoted the creation of a city network of the creatives of the city of Freetown to create opportunities to showcase around the world the potential of the city's creative industries. The city of Durban, through sort of city diplomacy and connections, was invited to this event and to this launch, and as a result, they created this very concrete opportunity for some of the Freetown designers to show their collection at Durban Fashion Week. So out of, if you want, a traditional, city-to-city policy conversation came the opportunity for designers from Sierra Leone, where the opportunities for fashion shows is more limited, to showcase their crafts and their production into a bigger market in South Africa. Similarly, we had opportunities to create connection between some of the Sierra Leone diasporas in the City of London and some of the Sierra Leone, the Freetown-based designers, so to create almost like a skills exchange around London Fashion Week. So using very much events like Fashion Weeks to create those connections. Another very concrete example this time relates to Milan. Milan holds every year probably the most important global design festival called Milan Design Week. And again, now for a couple of years, in partnership with, for example, the IKEA Foundation, we held events talking about, the role of design in shaping sort of migration journeys and ideas, where again, some of the mayors, including the mayor of Milan, spoke at. So using sort of these spaces that traditionally are, in this case, dedicated to design or other parts of the creative industries, to bring along the policymakers to engage in fact with the creatives about, in practice, what does it feel like if you are a city mayor, to facilitate the movement of people. And in a few months, in the city of Venice, there will be the world famous Art Biennale will open, and the topic of the next Biennale will be on foreigners and diaspora. So there will be another opportunity where, the art world will gather in the city of Venice, and and bring sort of issues of diaspora and immigration as part of what is otherwise traditionally a conversation fundamentally about just arts and creativity. So it's to think quite creatively at spaces and places where you can create an opportunity for an encounter, for a conversation, for an event. And then finally, the other way to do this very concretely is to actually create products, create actually beautiful work that can show the reason, or connect rather the policy questions around migration with creative crafts. I had the privilege and opportunity to help produce a short documentary called On Freedom of Movement, which is narrated again by a city mayor, but the film itself has now been around film festivals and been discussed in relation to in places related to filmmaking and the arts around around migration issues.
One of the unusual but very successful projects, or shall we say movement, is No Nation Fashion. Can you tell us more about it?
Well, the best way to talk about No Nation Fashion is to show you what No Nation Fashion does. So here we have an example of, I think, a very beautiful piece that I just picked up earlier today at the workshop that No Nation Fashion has in the Migrants Reception Center in the outskirts of Sarajevo. So is a simple and incredibly effective idea that you create a workshop, a space where people can use their skills. It all started during COVID, when people were, of course, unable to move easily, and there was a need to produce at local level things like masks, and then the discovery that some of the people that were in transit here in Bosnia had a lot of skills when it came to tailoring or to design, and that led to the opportunity to actually create a workshop, a label, and a space within the the Migrants Reception Center, to create pieces of art, I would say, that now sit in a beautiful concept store alongside other garments. And so this is what No Nation Fashion does and is. The idea that, of course, beautiful garments can be the result of a collaborative effort between a tailor from Kabul, a designer, and a visionary designer like Alexandra is from Bosnia, and then supported by agencies like the International Organization for Migration and supported by the European Union, who are your policy actors that are tasked to find practical solutions to the reality of human mobility. So that's the beauty and the simplicity of the idea.
We mentioned a lot of results, contributions, and successes. How does it actually contribute to social change then? How successfully does it break stereotypes and prejudices towards migrants?
Okay, that's obviously, it's both a challenge, but it's also a process in itself. It's something that requires time. Again, I was asking this question to colleagues here, and they were discussing how having something like the workshop and the presence of No Nation Fashion in the center has meant that some of the local population that were, to begin with, perhaps reluctant or worried about the presence of, as we all know when it comes to migration, the presence of large numbers of people, coming to our homes, and how that changed the experience of having a place where people with skills and talent can share what they know with others and work together and really create, to create a very concrete experience of we are in it together, which is, of course, the title of the exhibition, but really this sense that this is not about you being different from me just because you come from somewhere else, but this is something you and I can co-design, co-produce. And so this is, obviously the challenges on issues of identity and, the concept of being foreigners and the barriers the borders have created are huge, and it will take a long time to overcome those. But these are very concrete ways, and you can actually switch the conversation. It's almost having a very different conversation than the traditional ones about whether you're in favor of migration or not, or whether you think migration is a good or a bad thing. This is about skills and talent and design and creating something.
It challenges traditional narratives, for sure. I was actually thinking, so we have a lot of beautiful projects such as We Are in It Together or We're in It Together. We've heard a lot of examples of beauty of movement. What is the future of a movement?
So the future of movement is that movement will continue. We should always remember that not everybody moves, and actually there are lots of people who struggle to move, and people who decide to stay, and people who very much stay and move very locally. We all know how much there is a narrative that tends to emphasize a global movement as if this is something that everybody will do more of, but it will continue to be a real challenge for people to move, and not everybody will have the ability and the choice to do so. But I think it's very important to emphasize the beauty of movement as in the shared experience, that no matter the original the reasons and the driver for somebody to attempt a journey of any kind, that there is a beauty in the shared experience of that, taking along who you are, what you can do, what you wear, what you eat, which is another fascinating example. And so the beauty of movement is on purpose a concept that challenges the traditional negative stereotypical image of migration being inherently dangerous, problematic, a problem to solve, to re-emphasize the potential that moving between a place and another brings for all those involved. So the movement of people will be affected by changes in the world. Climate change is an obvious example. Some people will be forced to move, many more will find it harder to move. The war in Gaza will create, once again, displacement, and is already creating very significant amount of displacement. So a lot of it will continue to be problematic and difficult and challenging. I will continue to work on this, on the creative industries and the creative space and and the arts and design as practical ways in which people who move, no matter where they're from, can express both the challenges but also the lived experiences and the opportunities of what they do. So I think that with this movement of people that will continue to develop and to follow the geopolitical changes around us, I think that there is I'll remain committed to this long-term vision that if we continue to create concrete opportunities for people's skills and talents to be expressed, that will continue to create at least some space and some common ground between those who move and those who stay, and while they move, to create beautiful garments, pieces of art, experiences that can be shared.
Mrs. Foresti, thank you for your time and for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you very much.